Hi, welcome to a walk through Comics 2000.
This episode is two 3-pagers by Dario Adanti called El Calavera. These funny looking characters, these interesting page designs where the landscape sort of sits in the background of the whole page, and the funny use of letters in this first one and then icons in this second one. Now, I don't know Dario Adanti. He's from Spain, but look at how much fun he is having. He has a great life and seems to be admired by many. He has like 70,000 Twitter followers. And one reason to go through this book so slowly is to reintroduce myself or introduce myself to some of these cartoonists and find out what they're up to. And I encourage you to do that too. Okay, let's get started. So this is called El Calavera, which is the sort of decorative skull, and that's our main character here. This is titled A plus B equals C with a little circle around it. First panel, he's expressing his love. We see this a lot actually in this book. The second panel, he's expressing this like a capital A, these sharp lines. This next panel, she seems to be a little shocked. His expression is a little harder to read. Maybe he's placating or ingratiating or something. But in the next panel, she seems to have acquiesced, and she gives him this B, this soft capital B. And so the next panel, now we're on the bottom left here, he's given the A, she's given the B, and in a really charming, interesting thing, we zoom in just so we see the word balloons and the tops of their head, and that A and B is starting to merge a little. That balloon is starting to merge, and now bottom right we see it's getting a little closer. We move all the way up to page 2, and that AB has now merged completely into one unit. And we again zoom into the word balloon. We only see the tops of their heads. They seem pretty satisfied with this union, this act of merging the A and the B. And now in this panel, which is to me the funniest joke in the whole bit, he's walking away. His big A is now a little a, and he's very self-satisfied. He's got a cigarette in his hand, in his mouth, and he's walking away. And in the next panel, he's pretty much off panel. His little A, he's still very self-satisfied, but now look, there's a little C inside this big soft B. And she's happy too as this C starts to grow. And of course, you get accidentally pregnant by some sort of bandit, and daddy or mommy is going to come along. I'm going to guess this is daddy. And anyway, there he appears at the bottom of page 2. We go to the top of page 3. He notices, because he's looking at the word balloon, he's looking at that C inside of the B. She's still got this sort of like just happy, things are just going along look to her. He walks off panel. Now we see a landscape, a house. We see him rustling in some sort of closet. Oh, he's got a rifle. And this story ends with a very typical image of a young man and woman at the altar being forced to get married. The end. A, B, and C. So in this second episode, the second 3 pages, we have another series of symbols, or 2 symbols. Circle plus triangle equals sort of Western Christian traditional symbol for death or a gravestone or something like that. And we see this large panel, the skull creature over here, this police officer up top, and this sort of cat or dog down here. And this immediately brings to mind, at least to me, Crazy Cat by George Herriman, which we'll talk about in a minute. And on these signs, this arrow here and this like anvil here. And so we go down to the first row, which is on the bottom, and this police officer seems to have a teacup or coffee cup in his balloon with a question mark. I honestly don't know what he's getting at there. And so now the skull creature has this arrow shape in his word balloon. So um, I'm reading this as he wants to cross this road, and this cat is acting like no. This cat is acting like a heavy object, an anvil. And then so we switch over to page 2, and that sort of standoff continues. We have the skull with the arrow and the cat with the anvil, and the police officer watching on with a question mark. And now, as we saw in the last story, those two characters, those two icons rather, are starting to figure out, sort of negotiate how it is they're going to sort this out. And they get closer. The word balloons get closer. And here, the skull creature is getting a little more adamant. There's an exclamation point after his arrow now. The cat creature isn't giving in. That anvil is getting bigger. So suddenly the skull, his arrow breaks through its own word balloon, heading over to the second one. And now we're on the bottom, or now we're on the last page, the top of page 3. And that arrow has hit the balloon with the anvil in it. Thunk. These are supposed to be silent comics, by the way. But anyway. And now in this panel, it has penetrated the balloon and broken the balloon. And there it is, that anvil floating in space. And like classic Tex Avery cartoon character or something, that anvil sits in space for a moment and then falls to the ground. Zump. And now we have a squashed cat, an angry police officer, and who knows what this skull is feeling. Maybe it's glee, or maybe it's a little bit of horror. But anyway, he winds up in jail. The end. And this story in particular, but both a little bit, really owe a lot to George Harriman, which is really nice. This desert landscape, these decorations around the border, the character winding up in jail, but especially the triad, the one aggressive character who's trying to get something, who winds up hitting the other character, the police officer who's in charge of everything, is sort of the super ego and winds up throwing the other character in jail. We see this over and over again in the triad of Ignatz Mouse, Crazy Cat, and Officer Pup and Crazy Cat. And there's a couple other great classic things going on here too. This image, this final image in jail, looks so much like this classic Cliff Sterrett from Polly and Her Pals image that I can't imagine he didn't see it. I don't know Dario Adanti, but he seems to be deeply steeped in humor of all kinds, of many traditions, and there's some great articles and even a speech he's given on the web. And I encourage you to look for that. And I want to thank him for this great story. And I will see you next time with Kayla Allen.